let you go first.
Well, thank you everyone for showing up on a nice
Friday.
First and foremost, happy summer. It's finally summer in Minnesota, so we're excited about that. I am Gretchen Postula, and I'm with Norske Capital, and my colleague, Jane Marie Petty from Wells Fargo. We're excited to be here today and share some insights on ESG with you. We would also like to thank Carol Schleif from your board and your Director of Career Development on the Career Development Committee, who's helped put this together today. So thank you. And among that, she's a major collaborator, according to Carol, her own terms, a major collaborator and instigator with a variety of other peeps to getting folks involved in all sorts of ventures and adventures here within ESG. So thank you, Carol. And to Diane for helping us coordinate this effort today, and we're excited to have a conversation. So talking about ESG, on all things ESG, it is truly a blossoming area of the investment world, and Jane Marie and I are here to talk with you today about how it's evolved from more niche to mainstream. And we want to share with you some of our involvements in these practices and how our careers have evolved over time. We'll try to take up some time, but definitely leave time for questions afterward, and wrapping up here around 1 o'clock, because I'm sure there's cabin country or something that must be attended to. So with that, let's get things rolling. And we need a clicker.
Oh, here it is.
Oh, yep, thank you.
Thanks.
So a little bit of background on us to get us kicked off and get everybody familiar. Talking heads, that's great. I am the head of investor relations and the chief compliance officer at Norske Capital, and we're a private equity firm that got our start as the private capital team within Piper Jaffray back in 2000. We spun out in 2010 and formed an independent RIA firm and focused on all things in the private markets, particularly venture capital and private equity. Personally, I helped found the firm back in 2000 and spend a lot of my time talking with clients, maintaining and cultivating relationships with those clients and prospective clients, their advisors, their professional networks, tax, legal, reporting teams, as well as others in the industry that we consider contemporaries. Talking about all things that matter to them, and ESG certainly is a component of that, and a growing component of conversation, as you'd expect, which is, I think, why a lot of us are here today. Prior to that, I spent a little time in the golf industry, working with the PGA Tour's golf course properties division, and then also helping a startup company called Soft Spikes get going, doing marketing and communications for both of those firms. So a bit of a non-traditional background in getting into financial services. I come from golf, but I think it's communications and in marketing can kind of transcend both industries. And helping a startup never hurts in the private markets to be able to leverage that experience as well.
Thanks, Gretchen, and thanks for having us. Gretchen and I are really thrilled to be here, especially because neither of us is a CFA. And true confessions, I failed the CFA level 1 2 times. And the first time it was a beautiful day in June, and I was with the Galliard analysts, and they're like, "What the heck are you doing here?" And so I said, "I'm taking the exam." And so I was the first one out of there, but I wanted to experience it. And the second time I took that exam was actually with another one of my former colleagues, and we were. I'm not a quant person, and I haven't had accounting in 35 years, and I think I had one baby accounting class, so you have to kind of do the work. And so Jenny and I was just like, hey, I'm going to have let's have a study session, and I'm going to have this math guy come over, and so we had a math tutor and all this. But truth be told, I didn't put in enough, and I didn't have the background, and but I did absolutely learn a lot, and the key message for that is that there are in this market there's a real need for good financial analysis, and keep doing what you're doing and get those CFAs, and this is an investment product, but there's also a need for other types of thinkers in this space. It's changing the way that we're accustomed to thinking. So let's see. I wanted to just tell you a little bit about my strengths. Well, my weakness, obviously, I'm not very good at the quant stuff. And what are my strengths? And so my strengths are that I'm very curious. I'm somewhat annoying, and I'm like that kid that keeps asking why too much, and they just want to turn me off on so I kind of like doing things that you learn about, and I'm always known for challenging the status quo. As Jenny says, I go rogue. I'm not what you would call a linear thinker. I think I'm pretty non-linear, and you can see that on the kinds of things that I do. When I'm not too scattered, I'm a pretty good communicator, both verbally and in writing. So we all need each other for this business. And so just to give you a little bit of background on my non-traditional history, as I said, I was a psychology major in college. I went to Mount Holyoke, liberal arts, still believe hardcore in liberal arts. And then when I did an internship, in clinical psychology, I ran as fast as I could and went into business and knew nothing. So my first business experience was at MetLife. I moved to New York City, and I was put into a 2-year management training program, and they invested in rotating people around. I did big discs and all that, and then they paid me they'd paid me 12% every 6 months every time I passed exams. So at that time I was just taking exams, it was and helping where I could, but it was, I did all that Series 6, 763 and all that. But I found my niche. I worked in a lot of different places. My 35-year financial career spans the risk-return spectrum. Not as an analyst, but I've covered, money markets, insurance, stable value, private equity, public equity, all the way up to those rocket science, diversified alpha, beta, gamma, delta, what the heck are you talking about, strategies. And I worked with those professionals to in product development and in their communications effort. And so how did I get to where I am now? I'm now the National Director of Social Impact Investing, and it is my favorite job. Don't take that anybody I've worked with in the past. It is an incredible opportunity as the consulting director, because I get to go around the country and talk a lot and talk about ESG and social impact investing and why this is becoming a mainstream market. So it's my favorite job, and I've had many, because this topic of ESG is quant, but it humanizes the capital markets, and it puts a face on the corporations, and it says these kinds of societal and environmental issues are important, and hey, you guys, you can have a significant impact. So I just went on with my history, but I'm older than Gretchen, so.
Not by much, if at all. But I think that gives you a sense of where we come from in this marketplace. And ESG is obviously a growing area of conversation. It crosses all the different spectrums of investment world and everything as we work with clients or within our firms. A little bit about our firms, just to contrast us a little bit more. Norske Capital, we're a private markets investment firm, spun out of Piper in 2010. Our team got our start in 2000. We're based here in Minneapolis. I have a colleague in New York that helps on business development, as well as one in Boston that helps specifically on our infrastructure efforts. 13 employees deep, so a very small group is another good contrast here. And we started doing impact investing, and I use the term impact investing, back in 2005 when it was very, very nascent in the private market space. We manage about $1.3 billion in assets across 12 funds. 7 of those are impact focused, so we have been doing that a long time. And currently we look at things on the private equity side that are more in the secondary nature, as well as things in the clean energy infrastructure. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in a little bit here. But Wells Fargo as a contrast.
And as anyone in this room knows, Wells Fargo is gigantic, 1.3 trillion assets. I'm going to focus on this little teeny weeny piece of Wells Fargo called the Wells Fargo Social Impact Investing Team. That's the team I represent. And we are a public markets investing team. The investment folks are all out in California, and the team is headed by Lloyd Kurtz. Lloyd is was the chief investment officer of Nelson Capital Management. It was an independently operated subsidiary of Wells Fargo, but they had been in the business a long time for SRI. And so Lloyd, because it makes a point about his leadership, he's been around sort of like the godfather of this, and he was one of the developers of the first ESG indexes in the United States, now known as the MSCI KLD Domini 400. And now he's on the technical advisory board for the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board as it grows. So we have a deep experience. We're not just kind of jumping in to get a piece of the action. And we currently have about $1.2 billion in 3 asset classes: equity, fixed income, and REITs. And we we only do ESG, we call it SII, for ultra high net worth and some institutions like foundations.
And I can echo that Lloyd is the godfather of sustainable, responsible impact investing. When we first got into it, Lloyd was one of the first people that we talked with, and working with him and understanding what he was doing in the public markets, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. And so you're very lucky to have him.
Yeah,
heading up your efforts.
You should go to a conference with him. You feel like you're famous, and I'm like his bodyguard.
He's a bit of a rock star.
Yeah.
If you could be analytical and rock star in the same sense.
Right.
I think Lloyd might be that, just that. So we're going to start here a little bit and talk about what is ESG. What does it mean? And I think there are. It's multifaceted. It is not just one thing, not just one silver bullet, if you will. And ESG is something that encompasses all asset classes. It's not just one asset class. It's not its own asset. And there's really no cookie cutter kind of approach to this. I think it does encompass both qualitative and quantitative factors. And no one's right, no one's always wrong. So I think it is very much where the heart and the head come together from investing perspective. Up here you see some of the the aspects of environmental, social, and governance, just to kind of give you a flavor of it, with respect to, water and waste and deforestation and pollution, and we can talk about all the other industries that make up kind of climate change related aspects. Social is an area that's really kind of grown and expanded a bit here, post-recession even. We talk about human rights and labor rights and diversity, customer satisfaction, and treating the customer right, which is just good business, let's face it. But it also encompasses things like education. We're starting to talk more and more about private prisons and what that does to us as a society. And then governance talks a lot about board diversity, management policies, risk management types of things, transparency and data sharing, and knowing what you own kind of comes into that governance component of the ESG world.
Yeah, I would ditto what Gretchen said, and I would point out that it's such it's sort of like answering, what is ESG? It's like, what is the meaning of life? Because there's so many factors coming into play, and it's not always linear. There's a lot of complex, interconnected topics that somebody's going to go vegan, not so much for animals, but because it's draining the resources in the ground, and so there are just so many factors that come into play that you have to start paying attention to all of those interconnected things. And then this is my opportunity for some props. This is an example of this move towards consumer consciousness, or conscious capitalism. And so this type of thing used to be niche, but now if you just walk around a grocery store, and I'm not talking about Whole Foods, just walk around any grocery store, and you will see the importance of these intentional aspects, like always organic, chemical-free, sustainably sourced, fair trade coffee. These kinds of issues are investment issues, because the ultimate consumer and the one that is going to consume your investments care about how corporations are tackling these kinds of things. And what you can't see, I keep talking about cheap clothes and all that, I thought it was cool when my daughter was buying all this cheap fashion because it was saving me money, and then I saw true cost and how that stuff is made, and what you can't see, you empower, but then after you see it, you're kind of like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't buy that. So it matters, because we're going to shift our purchasing decisions. And eggs, animal welfare person, I'll eat eggs in a restaurant, but whenever me and my kids will go to the store, they've got to be, the eggs have to come from chickens that were free and had, 103 square feet to roam. And we won't buy them. I mean, if we're actually buying it, we'll choose to go to another grocery store. So all of these concepts they're not roll your eye, she's a granola person. These are indicators of a changing world and an interest in being more intentional about the impact investing can have.
One more story to add to that, because I think it's important, and when J. Marie was talking about how things intersect, I was talking with someone this morning who thought that the silkworms were getting overused, so they wanted to invest away from silk, and from investment and from purchasing. So they were going to go all organic cotton. They thought that was a good move in their intentionality. But then they started looking at the water needs of growing organic cotton, and so that was a rub against wanting to protect the silkworms and that industry and maintaining the integrity there, or the organic cotton and water. So I think everything has multiple indicators and multiple, effects.
Good point. And as investors, you're going to have to weigh and know what your intention is and get the material,
Get the
it's complex analysis.
Yep, on there. So,
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you want? I'll give you the public markets.
So we are very different in the way we do ESG in some respects because we're public. We invest in the public markets, and Gretchen will tell you about the private markets. But let me just tell you briefly about the public markets. It's, as I said, it's not a niche business anymore. There's 23 trillion worldwide, and in the U.S. alone, there was an increase from 8 trillion in 2016 to 12 trillion in the mid part of 2018. That's significant growth. One of my favorite lines is that there is a linguistic anarchy going on in our space, and we are no exception. If you hear, people always say, is it SRI or is it SII or is it ESG or is it, yes, I mean there are many acronyms, and ethical investing. Then people start to evaluate, oh, you're the old-fashioned, you're the SR, all you do is screen, and you just want to avoid sin stocks. So there's chaos right now, and that's a sign of it being a nascent market and shifting, and all the players like taking their claim and a viewpoint on it. ESG.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
but it's also bringing in your belief system creates a different acronym every day, because SRI could be the screening out, or the ESG might even be more screening in. Like,
Right.
I want more intentionality in my portfolio. I want to have more fair trade companies or employee-owned companies, because I think that's important, or different industries, to be able to, to get in there, to the linguistic anarchy, and I'm going to try to use that more because I think it's perfect.
I'm sure I stole it from somebody, but it is a good,
yeah. We have more acronyms, but we do.
So the big thing that you have to keep in mind with all of this is that ESG is not an asset class. It is a bunch of data. It's a way of thinking and incorporating these new points of data. At the end of the day, these are investment products, and so you need to, as investment professionals, you don't get a pass because you're doing an ESG type strategy. So I'm just going to briefly make a distinction between traditional SRI, 50, 60, 75, however many years ago. Traditional SRI was widely considered socially responsible investing, and it was primarily exclusions, and it was done for faith-based investors that wanted to eliminate sin stocks, Catholics who wanted to eliminate abortifacient stem cell research, those kinds of things. That technique, that screening technique, is still alive and well. It is still there, and there are a lot of socially conscious individuals that use this for a reason. And so then, as the industry started to go mainstream and develop, all of these other robust investment techniques have entered into the scene. So not only do you do screening, but there's a proliferation of ESG data. People are, there's optimization of the portfolio, and so the industry, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but this is what they didn't change SRI, which I guess is fine. They changed the meaning of the letters. So now the industry, they kept SRI, But what SRI means is sustainable, responsible, and impact investing. And it is capturing a more robust investment world on it. Now, how do you do it? Some ESG managers have intentional values component. They're active managers. We do that, and we are seeking a double or triple bottom line. We're not like saying at the cost of outperforming the S&P 500. We want to just be intentional. Some are quants, as I always mention. We need those sophisticated models and those technicians and analysts to bring together all of this amazing data and help investment people. Some are thematic. We've got clean energy. We've got a fund just for women. We've got, is anyone from Columbia Threadneedle in here? So I am always, marketing envy. You have this social bond fund, and it's, it can identify what cause, which municipal bonds, and I mean, municipal bonds are sort of like, yeah, that's a great way to show impact, but you've really focused in on that effort. There are, as I said, there's screening and exclusionary. It's alive and well, but as Gretchen said, a lot of the more maybe modern or contemporary concerns are things like, I don't want to invest in any company that is generating revenue from private prisons, or I want no guns, period. Am I invested in a gun company? Those are the kinds of, and fossil fuel free. If you are out there trying to be more sustainable, many people just don't want to invest in the biggest polluters or perpetrators of it. Some managers, like Lloyd's team, use all of those techniques, and it's part of our the way we invest and pick stocks, and so it's not just like any investment manager. There isn't one way to do ESG investing. And then just considerations: you can get ESG funds anywhere. Pooled funds, mutual funds, ETFs, separately managed accounts. You are not exempt from traditional prudent investment management. If you're going to, wipe out sectors and all that, you have to be aware of that, and sometimes it will, track the benchmark or not. So you have to be aware of that. Due diligence. It is not just okay to just say, yeah, they're an ESG manager. You have to, if you want to be a good reviewer, you have to do your due diligence in this world, and traditional investment considerations and ESG due diligence in the public markets.
Mm-hmm. Turn to the private markets.
She has the more exciting stuff
I
sometimes.
have the more cocktail party conversation
Yeah.
side of the world. How many folks in here have worked within alternatives in any shape or form? Okay, so a good amount. Within the private markets, this is kind of where that impact investing vernacular comes into the conversation. Investors feel like they can more closely align their investments with their beliefs or their missions and desires. So where you're screening in and screening out things in your public portfolio, you may be have an advocacy role in your public markets with shareholder engagement and things like that. On the private side, you feel like you're funding what you believe in oftentimes, and so that's very attractive from that perspective. Much like the overall landscape of ESG, private markets is definitely a growing area as well. As the definition of impact or ESG evolves, it definitely is growing in opportunity set. When we got started at Norske, it was very much more environmental in focus, much more climate change related, early stage venture kind of world, doing things in transportation, think Tesla of the world, but solar and wind energy generation, the start of energy storage. So battery technology was kind of on the forefront at that time. Again, doing things in the waste environment where, you know, now as more and more entrants come in, they come in with their belief system. They're redefining what is impact investing. And it kind of goes to more sustainable ag and ag tech kind of technologies, you know, knowing what you're eating, the organically raised, the close farm to table kind of aspect. A lot of things in education, and healthy living and aging is another key area in what's now impact investing. So healthier foods and snacks and supplements. One I like to talk about is Bare Foods. You know, we've all been through an airport and wanted something healthy and to nibble on as we run for the gate. The Bare Foods snacks, organic, dried fruits and vegetables, bought by Pepsi, by their Frito-Lay division, because they saw the consumer wanting something better, and so pulling that investment into the big Pepsi umbrella was a good example there. You know, the entire built environment is an area too. HVAC systems that are much more efficient, LED lighting, passive solar, no VOC installations. I mean, the list goes on and on and on what types of things become impact today. So kind of we walk around in our logic, and it's kind of renew, reuse, and reduce. So kind of following a lot of those broad themes within that world. Again, millions and billions of dollars coming into this space. More and more fund managers entering the space. You know, things that you might want to think about from an investor consideration. Private markets often are qualified purchaser type funds. So those with you know, a healthy amount of assets, being able to take advantage of it. But then to also echo Jay Marie, diligence is a key component to what needs to happen here. You don't get a free pass just because, oh, I'm an ESG fund or I'm an impact fund. Oh, great, let me give you my $10 million. It doesn't work that way. You still have to have good fundamental diligence and be aware of the industries you're stepping into. These are sometimes newer industries. A water industry, as an example, would be something where you need to understand the marketplace that you're building these new products for, kind of disruptive technologies. And you're selling it to a municipality, which oftentimes might not buy your product as readily as it might on the private market side. So being able to know what you're getting into, know the industry that you're around, but know where you're going to exit. Very crucial aspects of consideration as you're doing diligence on a company, a fund, a manager, whatever that case may be. So we look at any opportunity within Norske. We look at the ESG components, make sure there's that intentionality that we're looking or driving for. Satisfy that, but then it becomes truly just a financial investment analysis, oftentimes with its own little quirks along the way. On the private side, as in the public, there's different ways that investors can access. You can directly invest in a single company. You can say, I've got a friend's cousin has an idea, I'm going to fund that. Or you're a big multifamily office or endowment foundation. You can certainly do that. Risk reward comes into the conversation. You're funding one company, so you've got just one exposure. So that's a consideration. That takes good diligence. It takes a good team behind that to manage that out to a proper exit, because again, you're about the market rate return. You can invest in a single VC or PE fund. You get some diversification across a certain thematic area, where it be geography or industry sector or stage of investment or combination therein. But you get probably 20, 25 companies perhaps in a portfolio to give you a little bit more diversification. You kind of have to place those bets every year to keep that portfolio going, so you have to have a good amount of capital to be able to do that. What we do at Norske is a fund of funds. So we're aggregating fund investments to give investors a diversified one-stop shop of investment solutions along the ESG realm. And we take it upon ourselves, and we've been doing it since 2005, to know the managers in the space within the private markets, and being able to say, we want something in the water space. We want exposure there in our portfolio, and that's we've got 12 managers, and we pick one or two of them, and on down the line. So there's yins and yangs to how you participate in the marketplace, just to be mindful of. And I think I touched upon it when we first got started. We do things in the secondary space too. This ESG impact investing is nascent compared to the more traditional marketplace, and there wasn't a liquidity option for investors. So you bought into a limited partnership, a venture fund, and it's 7 years old, and you've had a change in circumstance, and you need liquidity, and these are illiquid assets. So you need to find a way to offload that out of your portfolio. There's, in traditional investing, there's secondary markets that are very healthy and efficient. In the impact area, there weren't any liquidity outlets, and so they just had to hold it. So we came in as a firm and started giving liquidity to those investors who needed it. It also allows new investors, and we're seeing more and more new entrants in the marketplace, come in and step in using secondaries to start building their portfolio. So it's another way to diversify a portfolio and quickly build out an allocation in alternatives. So secondaries are something that's newer in the impact investing, and that's kind of what we've been doing. One of the key areas, talking about private markets, is tracking and reporting and metricizing and all of those things. Much more nascent in the private market side than it is in the public market side. We've done, and there's copies in the back of the room, a series of these impact reports. They're more case study, anecdotal. There's not a certain metric that you can screen in or screen out for, oftentimes in the private equity world. So we look to give investors some kind of those cocktail party conversations that we talked about. Being able to say, this is my ag tech company, and it looks to create the best way to deliver water and nutrients into a crop to maximize the yield. And that's the company that they're putting money into to help support that effort to grow more food and smarter. To, again, the Teslas of the world that everybody likes to talk about, or the LED lighting company, or no VOC insulation or materials. All kinds of things. So we touch upon a number of those, and it helps to give some tangibility to something that is you don't know what you're investing in on day one. So this helps give a little bit of conversation around that. But more recently, we're starting to see things with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, kind of mapping. There are 17 goals that are set in place to help solve the world's challenges and problems. So there are a number of those, and we've started to map our investments to that you'll see in this deck. I should have done that here. But kind of, talking about the different goals set out, whether it be climate action or responsible consumption, so to the consumer goods, to affordable clean energy, or education, or land above water, land below water, kind of all those different aspects of it. That is a way that people in the private markets are starting to align their portfolios with their belief system, using those SDGs as kind of the metricizing as they work along the path there. Okay.
I wanted to add before not on the private markets, but you did such a good example of bringing it to life in the private markets, that I meant to try to bring ESG to life in the public markets with an example. And so, as I mentioned, there's a proliferation of data. If you're into it, it's like a candy store for data wonks. But you'll see MSCI, Bloomberg, True Value. There's specialty, I think I had one more prop, there's specialty researchers such as FAIR, and I was just at the US SIF, our industry conference that was here in Minneapolis, and it talks about plant-based Impossible meatballs by not using beef. Impossible meatballs use 95% less land, 70% less water, 80% 7% fewer, how do you say GHG, just like that? GHGs, yeah. So this is a nice marketing that I grabbed and swapped up, but it makes a very good point as you have lots of big companies like Costco that are part of this thematic research in the industry. So there's so much data out there, and I take exception a little bit when I sort of bristle when somebody says, oh yeah, they got a good score on ESG. Like, what do you mean? It's a good starting place, I suppose, but as this data becomes better and stronger and all that, then it's just, I'm going to be out of a job. I'm not going to have anything to talk about because it's going to be mainstreamed into your into the way you all invest, and so and just also the two points: the rating agencies, which you all know and love and familiar with. We did a call. The rating agencies are taking climate issues into consideration in their reports. Now, the investment people that are using it, there's still some issues that need to be established, but it's a good start. And materiality issues are really big. Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, that is sort of like the FASB of the ESG world. And if you really want to get into it, you guys should go on there and see all these materiality maps and, just all the points of data. It really rattles people like me, but it is important. So, okay, my example. Let's take a public market example, perhaps the elephant in the room. Let's talk about Wells Fargo. and we have, I am a proud team member of Wells Fargo. I've, been there a long time, and our team cannot invest in Wells Fargo, but I don't use that as an escape to, to dodge the bullet, because every conversation I go into, I know they're looking at me like, wonder how, Wells fares on all of this. So if we could invest in Wells Fargo, which we cannot, we would have put them in the penalty box for controversy. And that doesn't mean that we would have outright sold them. We would dig in and watch them. We might put them aside. We might do engagement. We might look to see if they're making the changes. But we wouldn't just outright sell them. This isn't a game of who is the most perfect, and it sort of reminds me of when I say I don't even say it, but if I'm trying to cut down on meat or somebody will be like, I swear I saw you eat a hamburger the other day. Well, you know what? So what? It's yes, we deserved that, and yes, we absolutely have to rebuild trust and make amends, and we're going through incredible change. But the point of this is a couple things. Wells was always one of the players in most of the big responsible indexes. And then one of them, I always get confused which one did it, maybe somebody knows, but one of them, not only did they take out Wells after 2008, they just decided they hated all banks and they were tossing the banks out. So that happens. But we are still in the FTSE for Good. And I believe that Calvert or one of the other indexes may have booted us for, we're just not ready to deal with all these questions, because there's a lot going on in the financial and with Wells. And our brand which is a sign of ESG, has suffered tremendously. And so we are all rebuilding. But I am a cheerleader and a believer, and I'll tell you why. Not that we don't need the change and not that we deserve it, but we need these big, gigantic corporations to help move the needle on sustainability challenges. Me switching to this type of, instead of the plastic. I know, I went to a meeting and I drank 3 plastic bottles in a meeting, and the guy said, I'm concerned about plastic in the ocean. And I was like, oh my goodness. You know, it's, think about the movement, a corporation committed to sustainability issues, what they can do to address these global challenges. So, so I was at the US CIF meeting, and I started to shrink when one of the speakers from Hermes put Wells Fargo up on a gigantic slide, and I thought, oh God, nobody's going to talk to me at cocktails. And so what he did was talk about the rough, I think his slide, I have it here, social issue, Wells Fargo issue, regulatory and legal settlements relating to retail bank sales practices. He said they liked what they saw and the change that is being made. And I was like, phew, that they're not, I feel like the poster child lately, and yes, we deserve it, but I mean, there's also a path. Can we change, and can we do things differently? And so I wanted, so there are, we're getting back in after review. We're not there yet, but even the big managers, like I travel a lot with the Trilliums and all that, they're saying, okay, I think they might, we're still watching them, but they still need to do something. So I wanted to encourage any of you that are into the public market space for ESG, and Wells Fargo, this is my cheerleader thing, this is a brochure, but it's a sign of Wells is absolutely focused on their commitment to sustainability, and they, you can see things like a $200 million commitment to renewable energy efforts. After DAPL took effect, we reviewed the whole Equator Principles, and we're changing. And 2017 highlights 59% increase in water efficiency since 2008. 28% of total square footage in leased and owned buildings is LEED certified. It just goes on and on and on. And when you think about it, is it part to help? Yeah, sure. It's part. We need to capture that. Is it real? It's absolutely real. We, corporations like us, not all, but when you get in and dig and see the commitment, yes, we suffered. We were in the penalty box. We still are. But it is important to remember the power that the financial markets can play in these global challenges. So, but private always has like all the good. We bought an organic food company.
Well, that's the intentionality of those private companies, but making sure that their labor practices are good. They have diversity in their staffing, and they pay a fair wage and things of that nature. Those spill into the private markets as well, and I think we get to look at them at their onset. In the public markets, you get to look at them, you make your assessments, but things change and evolve, and you either decide to advocate and to get in and to help foster the change you want to see happen, or you or you get out of the stock, and hopefully more people are helping affect the change, and others will come back into the fold.
That's a great point. Engagement is part of what we do. So a lot of the change that you see occurring in many corporations, or I forget who said we will not buy any more of this, or we won't, that's due through investor engagement, not activism. I mean, some activists, but that sounds so hostile, but, and some is. But I'm saying this is the power of like Hermes getting in there, talking to all those big people at Wells Fargo and saying, how fast did you turn over your players? How did you know? So that's the power of putting this stuff into the investment equation.
Awesome. We'll leave you with some, we've got a few minutes here left, and I want to make sure we have time for any questions. There are a litany of tools and resources to use here. And I think we leave you with one thing. It's ESG is a tool for us to use. It is not, sustainability is the ultimate goal here. So ESG is just one tool to use for the greater good. A number of resources from the CFA and SASB and the US CIF group that we've touched upon. And I know Carol's working with the College for Financial Planning.
Oh yeah, she passed, this is the Deputy Chief Investment Officer and she's also your Chair of Career Planning and was kind enough to invite us, but she's studying in her spare time and took the FSA, what do you call it? The
Fundamentals of Sustainability Accounting.
And you liked it. There's one more.
Yeah, and I just passed the first level last week and I'm studying for the second level, and the second level in particular is really interesting because it goes into the materiality of each sector and segment. The first one lays, if you're not familiar with it, it lays the background, and they're trying to develop a set of metrics that will lay over the SEC reporting requirements that we can all take the companies to ask them to report their efforts on material sustainability issues as part and parcel of their quarterly and annual filings. And then the second one deep dives by industry. So my analytical nerd loves that second one because it's great.
And I think this is a compliment to, you tell all of your CFAers, I mean, this enhances your analytical skills. Now, me, not so much. I'm studying for, I am studying for a new certification called the CSRIC certification. And I hope one day within the next 30 days I'll say that I am CSRIC certified. Carol keeps like goading me, Carol said, I think I'm going to take that next. And I'm like, God, I better take that. So, it's just good big picture information that keeps you abreast of what this business is all about. And the other resources that Gretchen noted, there's TIP, the Investment Integration Project. It's good, like approachable for financial advisors. Lots of good stuff. And I love certain reading or audio material. These aren't about hardcore analysis. My favorite book is The Age of Sustainable Development by Jeffrey Sachs, and it covers helps all those interconnected pieces, the sustainable development goals, and why you need to care about gender equality across the world, because you're missing the boat on using 50% of your resources, your brain power. So to me, it's fascinating, but it's big and thick, and I loved audio books because it helped me get through this gigantic book, and it was actually interesting. So, yeah.
Many more resources. One quick Google search will give you plenty of other resources. Trade organizations, global groups, data, how to get started, all those different aspects of it at your fingertips. And obviously, would be happy to be a resource for anyone as well, if you have questions. don't hesitate to reach. We have a network here, and there's a growing network. And
Minneapolis is
particularly
big, yeah.
in the Minneapolis market, which is why the U.S. CIF event, their national event, came to Minneapolis. First time they had taken that out of their rotation between Washington, D.C. and Chicago. They sought out Minneapolis as the next area for growth within impact investing. And that was a nod to all of us here. So, well done.
Oh, so we have one more close slide. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, go.
Left brain meets right brain. It takes all kinds of people to get into ESG. And we need all kinds of skill sets and personalities and ways of thinking to make this work. It's not a cookie cutter, not the same old, bring your best, and ESG will have a place, certainly.
All kinds of minds.
All kinds of minds.
So it's 4 minutes to 1. Does anybody have any questions that you would like to ask? I did bring like a little paper, but you don't have to take it. I was conscious, but it's on gender, and it's a good piece that we did. Jenny?
I have a question. So I know you mentioned you were in a meeting there where the client said he's worried about plastic, but how are you talking about this, or do you have clients who don't care about plastic, aren't talking about carbon, and they're just totally, what's my return? Like, how would you talk about ESG to those types of clients?
We have many clients that want to debate, eliminating energy or tobacco stocks or something like that because they're performing. This whole move is about, I'm not trying to convince those people to do our strategy. This is we're not telling you what the values are. We're telling you we can align to your values. That doesn't mean we're going to go out and buy tobacco stocks for him, but this is moving the thinking from short-term benchmark related, just got to hit the numbers and the performance and look at that S&P 500 and quarterly reports, to a longer-term thinking to be embraced by the CFA Institute. So to that person that that wants just the return, that's a really good point. I would say that we are going to outperform that benchmark as much as we might underperform in some markets. So we are, you can't assume that keeping tobacco in is going to be the best way to get performance. It's sort of a debate with passive management. Now there are ESG passive indexes, so I'm not dissing that, just for the record. But it's sort of adding value, and it's not just through exclusions. So instead of like, if we might take out tobacco, but we might put in something that's really good for your lungs. That's positive and tied to sustainability. So it's optimization. So I always recommend people should not focus on the exclusions. And if that client absolutely wants to invest in tobacco, then he should invest in tobacco, not through us.
But fossil fuel free is another good example there, where in your portfolio construction you might want energy as a component to capture the global world, but you'll do it through clean energy versus fossil fuel energy. So it's still maintaining an energy exposure, broadly speaking, because we need that in our, we know that there's good fundamentals there for portfolio construction, but being able to do it with a clean energy solution rather than a more extractive energy solution. So I think there's opportunities to do that and still maintain good portfolio construction. And on the private side, I mean, we are looking to set out for a market rate return at all times. At no point do we give concession, because it is an impact-minded opportunity. And about half the clients I have come into our funds these days come with some type of impact or mission alignment. The other half just see it as a good return profile. So we are getting uptake from both sides.
Yeah, and that's if you leave with one thing today, choosing to invest responsibly does not mean that there is a performance or a risk trade-off. It is an added set of inputs to help you maintain those same risk-return characteristics that you're seeking, and there's bajillions of studies out there, academic studies, that show there is no performance or risk trade-off if you're managing to traditional benchmarks. It's like any active manager. You're going to put your formula in there, and you're going to seek to maintain the S&P 500 and keep it tracking error 2 to 3% and all that. You're going to put optimization techniques in there, and your goal is still to maintain risk-return characteristics relative to that benchmark. There's no proof that I don't want to keep picking on tobacco, but you know, that's a myth. That's from the old days when it was just about exclusions, and that's why they often say that.
You talk about how your teams are structured in terms of who's making the ESG decision. Is it different than the analyst on the desk? Is it same people that are doing the fundamental analysis? So
we fully integrate ESG analysis into our CFA analyst investment decision-making process. So they have those ESG analysis, and the factors we incorporate are as important as those discounted cash flows and you know, looking at the financial statement analysis and all of the quantitative modeling that they do. We integrate it at the security level. That being said, we also have, which is, I don't know if it's different. A lot of places like Breckenridge, they don't have any standout ESG research abilities, but we do also have researchers that are focused on ESG research, and their role is to work with those investment analysts to add additional insights. And so as I said, you know, when I'm out a job and whenever that happens, one day it will seriously be, there'll probably be a dedicated, like based on what the issue is, but all analysts are going to have to embrace sustainability factors, and one day it'll be in the reports. It won't be a separate area. It'll be embedded in your financial statements, and so this is sort of new. This is new territory, new way of thinking for many. And so in our case, we integrate. You know, that CFA analyst has to know all the ESG components of a company.
Sure. And on the private side, we use that as our first blush of consideration. When we're looking at a fund, a secondary infrastructure project, we look at the ESG factors as a first layer to make sure it meets that criteria. And then from that point, it just becomes that traditional financial analysis at that point. But everything we do will touch upon positive ESG.
I'm going to be the bad guy and call a halt to these proceedings. But I know that we could keep going for literally hours, maybe days. But please help me thank these wonderful people for a great session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.